Welcome back to another week of Mad Times with Madison and sometimes Harvey, as you heard last week when she decided to press all of my goddamn buttons. Physically and like metaphorically, she pressed my personal buttons by getting on my nerves. Don't come up. God damn it. Your tootsies are cold. Anyway, thank you for listening last week. If you listened at all. If you didn't, I did some good ones last week, so you should listen to them. I did The Crime Spree of Andrew Cunanan and The Life and Death of Marie Antoinette. If you're a subscriber, you got that one, which is actually kind of interesting. But today I'm going to be doing the case of Carolyn Warmus, which is often referred to as the Fatal Attraction murder, if you have ever seen that movie before, with Glenn Close and I can't remember his name. Anyway, Carolyn Warmus was born in Troy, Michigan on January 8th, 1964. Her father was a self-made millionaire from the insurance business, like an actual millionaire. He had private jets and houses in several states, just like rich behavior. She was the oldest of 3 children, but her sister Tracy was born just a year after her, so they were almost the same age. New York Magazine ran an article where it said that her and Tracy were essentially rivals. It was said that Tracy was prettier than her, she was more popular than her, and that just really bothered Carolyn to no end. Carolyn's dad also paid attention to neither of them because he was so focused on the business. And then around the time Carolyn was 8, her parents divorced and her dad married his younger secretary. What a cliche, as they all do. What is it with secretaries? Is that like a sexy job? I don't understand. Why is everyone marrying their secretaries? The children lived with their mother until she also remarried in 1979, and then they moved back in with her father in the $500,000 house he built for his new wife. So they live with her mom, she gets remarried, and she's like, I can't do this anymore, go live with your dad. So they move into this luxurious mansion that he built for his secretary. Carolyn was affected by the divorce, and she also tried to use her money to buy friends, and she was always in competition with her sister Tracy. It was just all not a great mix of things for Carolyn. Just a lot of things going on separately that merged into just like not a great time. Her friend said she often sought out older, unattainable men. After high school, she enrolled in the University of Michigan, boo, to study psychology. It was there that she met teaching assistant Paul Lavin. So they started dating in June, but Paul had said it was not something serious. This was not like a thing for him. But for Carolyn, it was extremely serious. She took it very serious. She was obsessed with him. Everything she did with Paul in mind. Her friends would say, like, if they complimented her clothes, she would be like, well, do you think Paul would like it? Or if she was thinking about cutting her hair, she'd be like, do you think Paul would like it if I cut my hair this way? Just like that level of deranged. In December, he broke things off with her because he wanted to get engaged to a girl named Wendy Siegel. Now, I'm not sure if there was an overlap or anything like that. The article just said that he broke things off with Carolyn because he wanted to get engaged to a different girl. I don't know if, he had also been seeing that girl a little bit because he didn't think him and Carolyn were in a serious relationship or what. I don't know. Either way, Carolyn did not care for that. She was not about that. She stalked him around campus. She called him nonstop, like literally nonstop. His phone would ring all day. When he and Wendy moved to a different town, she got their new number and called nonstop at their new house. In April of 1984, she decided to actually go to their new home and try and get inside. And then she had to be removed by the police. If you are catching the vibes that are being foretold here. Also, I went shopping yesterday and I bought a bunch of Christmas decorations because I'm going to do a Grinch theme this year because it's my favorite movie ever. So I'm drinking a peppermint coffee out of my Grinch cup right now and it's making me extremely happy. So don't be that person who tells people not to decorate for Christmas. Don't do that. It's a great time. The vibes with Christmas decorations are always on. All right. So she goes to a new house. She tries to get inside. She has to be removed by the police. It's not like she tried, failed, like, all right, I'll go away. She had to be physically removed. She left a note on Paul's car the next month that she was pregnant, which was a lie. She left a note on Wendy's car after she got home from vacation. And this note is just bizarre. You can read it. I link an article. I think the link looks like it comes from Google, but it's like a scan of an old article from 1990, and it has like pictures of these notes and stuff. It is bizarre. So she leaves a note on Wendy's car after she gets home from vacation about how tan she was now and how like she doesn't even stand a chance. So Carolyn's like, I look good now, so you don't even stand a chance with Paul. And she told Wendy that her time was almost up because of how hot she looks now, which I want that level of confidence. I want that level of delusion. I really do. I never understood the saying ignorance is bliss until I realized that knowing stuff sucks. So anyway, she's telling Wendy, like, listen, I'm really hot now, so you might as well just get the fuck out of there. Eventually, Paul and Wendy had to get an injunction and barred her from the wedding and contacting them in general. Her friend said that she became insanely depressed after this and was even suicidal. However, that did not stop her again. She thought, okay, well, Paul's Jewish, so that was probably the problem. So she converts to Judaism, because why not? She tells the rabbi that she's marrying a Jewish man, so she has to convert. And the rabbi even came out and said, like, he thought it was weird that she was, like, doing this for her future husband, but her future husband never came with her to, like, these ceremonies. Just unhinged. Unhinged. So she plans to apply to the Columbia Teacher School, and in the meantime gets a job at a bar. She fit in well enough, but the owner thought she was running some type of like credit card scam, and she got fired. I'm not really sure what type of scam. There are like a million credit card scams she could run. Something with like charging people's cards and then like taking cash, and I don't fucking know. Very complicated. Anyway, she got fired. And a man had come in after she got fired to talk about how they briefly dated, and she called him so much that he had to change his number. So, I'm going to go a little out of order just because I thought this made the most sense, because there's really not a good place for it, but it all ties together at the end, so bear with me here. In the summer of 1987, Carolyn hired a private detective, Vincent Parco, to track down a man and get incriminating photos of him. So he sent his field investigator, Russo, out with Carolyn, which Russo said was unusual. The client does not usually go with you, like when you're doing your private investigator shit. While they were on the way to the bar, she had told him that this bartender that she fell in love with was married, but he said he would leave his wife for her. So she just wanted to get some pictures to send to the wife to hurry the process up. She's like, okay, well, we could make this faster if, like, you make your wife leave you. They ended up not getting any pictures at all. So they, like, concocted this plan. So they took some photos of Carolyn in lingerie, and then Parco was going to, like, physically cut out and paste pictures of Carolyn in the lingerie and this bartender guy together. Whatever. Shady practice. Carolyn ended up becoming close with Parco and often visited him at work in his new office. She would bring different problems, like, just like lies. Like, I don't know what, like, her MO was here. Just, she had come to him and said her dad's plane was being sabotaged and blown up and that her sister was involved in a hit and run. But, of course, she never had any proof of it. So I don't know if she was, like, just trying to hang out there or, like, find more reasons to hang out with Parco. I'm really not sure. Or I think she's just a little unhinged. Finally, Carolyn is said to have asked Russo for a gun and a silencer, but he refused. She said she needed it for protection. She said there were a lot of burglaries around her home, whatever. Around that same time, with the bartender, when she meets Parco, Carolyn meets Paul Solomon in September of 1987. They meet where they are both teaching, because Carolyn did end up going to Columbia for a master's degree in teaching, so they are both teaching at the same place. Paul had been married to his wife Betty Jean for nearly 20 years. Her family said Betty Jean was a super happy kid. She was always in musicals and busting out into song. She was the oldest of 4 children. Her siblings all said she was just so nice. She always gave everyone the benefit of the doubt. She graduated high school in 1966 and then went to college. She really had no interest in going to college, but she was just sort of trying to make her parents happy. See it all the time. She was planning on just marrying her high school sweetheart, Earl. She's like, I don't really want to go to college. I'm just going to marry Earl. But Earl was killed in a car accident shortly after they graduated, like months or maybe a year later. It was in 1967 that she met Paul Solomon. He was described as a short and serious man. When Betty met Paul, she started to change, her family said. He was very possessive of her. He wouldn't let her wear makeup. He wouldn't let her wear skirts above the knee. She wasn't allowed to cut her hair. Betty sort of just became withdrawn from her friends and family, as abusers tend to make happen, because this is a type of abuse. He joined a conservative fraternity and had Betty join the matching conservative sorority. Eventually, Betty dropped out of school after 2 years and stayed in town until Paul graduated. Betty's friend joined a different sorority, so Paul forbid her to talk to her. So Betty's only friend switched to a different sorority, and he's like, okay, well, you can't talk to her anymore. Her friend said Paul was just not a nice person. He was so focused on being an important person in whatever fashion that he could. He was very rude to Betty and short with her constantly. Her friend said they were quite frankly shocked when she married him in 1970. Paul had actually joined the Air Force the year before, and now that they were married, they both moved to Alaska, where he was stationed for 3 years, and her daughter Christina was born in 1973 when they were in Alaska. After Christina was born, they moved back east, and Paul finished up his degree and started teaching at Greenville Elementary in Edgemont, New York, where he met Carolyn. Betty had gotten a job and became a bank manager, so with their 2 salaries, they were able to finally make ends meet, buy a home. Paul kept himself extremely busy, coaching sports, working out, so he was hardly home. So Betty also had her own interests in the community that she kept herself busy with, so they barely saw each other. They have like 2 completely separate lives. Like, he is coaching extra sports for extra money. He's working out to lose weight and look good. Betty's like planning these events in her community, things like that. They're just like living 2 separate lives. After Betty's sister's son was killed in an accident, Betty handled all the arrangements for her sister and did everything for her. After the burial, they went back to Betty and Paul's house, where her mother said she hated it. She said it looked like the home of 2 people who were super busy, who barely saw each other. It did not look like a family home. She said dinner was microwaved frequently because nobody was home to have a whole meal. She did not care for the vibes of this home immediately. So despite all of this, and despite the fact that Paul had like become a much nicer, much calm person with like his coworkers and people outside of his home, he still demanded to be an authority figure at his home. So he's nicer to all these other people, and he's 0% nicer to Betty. Betty was sick of it. She made just as much money as he did, so it didn't make any sense to her why he would act like he was the only one providing for the family. Like, that's the kind of vibe he gave off. Like, I'm at work all day, blah, blah, blah. But, like, Betty makes just as much money as he did. She thought about leaving him multiple times, her sister said, but she did not end up doing so. She told her mom she was thinking about leaving him, but her mother told her to not make any rash decisions. So one of the people that Paul had been treating so nice and softened up to was 24-year-old Carolyn Warmus. And at this time, he's almost 40. Just so we're clear. He's like much older than her. He's like a creepy pervert. But maybe Carolyn likes creepy perverts. I don't know. It's kind of leaning that way. It's not clear when it happened, but shortly after they met, they began having a full-blown affair. I don't know why that was so hard for me, which is right up Carolyn's alley. We know she loves unattainable men. Her friend from high school was exactly right. I don't know why you would go after a relationship like this, but something about it. Thrill of the hunt, perhaps. I don't know. So she's loving this. She went as far to insert herself in the family in order to try and keep their affair a secret. So she's like inserting herself in the life of the Solomon family. She acted like she was Betty's friend. She took their daughter Christina on like a solo ski trip without either of her parents. Like, she's integrating herself into this family. on this trip, Carolyn had told Christina that she thought her mother didn't like her. And Christina tried to be like, oh, no, of course she likes you, blah, blah, blah. But even Christina sort of felt like deep down like, yeah, I don't think she does like you. Paul had even briefly stopped seeing Carolyn around August of 1988. It did not last long. And in that time, Carolyn had confided into a friend that her relationship wasn't progressing the way she wanted, and she was going to hire a private investigator to tell him that his wife was cheating on him. So she's like, I'm going to make him think that Betty is cheating on him. I'm going to flip the script. And because I believe he told Carolyn that when Christina graduated, he was going to leave Betty. So it's not like he was making it clear that this wasn't going to go anywhere. He was telling her that, like, we're just waiting until Christina graduates. We're going to get divorced. I'm going to leave Betty for you, blah, 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 blah. As they all do. On January 8th, 1989, Carolyn turned 25. And a week later, after that, on January 15th, Carolyn said Paul called her and they made plans to celebrate at a restaurant. He said he really wanted to see her, even though he didn't feel great. Carolyn said she asked to make sure he was okay, and he said, no, but I want to see you, and I don't get many chances to get away, because at this moment, Christina is away on another skiing trip. So he's like, I don't get many opportunities to just, like, leave the house like this, so we should take advantage of it. He told Betty he was going bowling. She asked him not to. He did anyway. So he does go to the bowling alley for a little bit and meets up with Carolyn at the Yonkers Holiday Inn, which just sounds like a made-up place. So Carolyn gets there around 7:45 p.m. They met at the bar and lounge there, and Carolyn said they had just talked. She said they talked about, like, her hair, her clothes, his wife. The bar manager had said it looked like they were arguing. Around 10:30 p.m., they left the bar and had sex in his car until around 11:30 when he went home, and when he got inside, he saw his wife, Betty Jean, shot dead on the floor. So Betty Jean was lying on the living room floor. She had been pistol whipped about the head and had 9 bullet wounds in her back and legs. None of the neighbors had heard the shots. There was no sign of forced entry, and the only indication of a struggle was a disconnected telephone, and police photographed a black woolen glove near Betty's body. So at first they're focused on Paul, obviously. Most often, it's the husband or the lover or something. He told the police he was out bowling all night. Then he came clean and said he did go bowling for a little bit, and then he left and met up with Carolyn Warmus at the Holiday Inn, where they had dinner and drinks, and then was like, and also, like, we slept together in my car. No big deal. Just throw that in at the end in case it's relevant. After the murder, Paul was depressed. He took a leave from his job, and for the first time, he did nothing. They described it as, like, he was just idle. He was, like, always so busy and always trying to do this and that and make something of himself that, like, he just sort of shut down for the first time in a long time, maybe ever. Also, after the murder, he cut ties with Carolyn. One source said his lawyer told him to, like, you can't be associated with that, like, your mistress anymore. Whatever the reason, he severed ties with Carolyn and shortly after started dating someone else, a fellow coworker, Barbara Baller. He's back on his bullshit very shortly. Well, following her MO, she decides to stalk them. She called them nonstop, her usual behavior. Well, 5 months after the murder, Paul and his new girlfriend Barbara went to Puerto Rico together. Carolyn decided to invite herself. Obviously, she followed them out of the country to Puerto Rico. While there, she posed as a police officer and called Barbara's family and urged them to end her relationship with Paul Solomon. She's like, I am the police. Make your daughter break up with her boyfriend. I don't know what she was trying to get out of that exactly. So Carolyn claimed that Paul invited her to Puerto Rico. She's like, I didn't follow you here. He invited me here. Solomon said she was stalking him and reported her to the police. So then authorities immediately became suspicious of Carolyn. So they're like, maybe it wasn't the husband. Maybe it was the mistress scorned, perhaps. Something that did not help her case was her past involvement with the private detectives had come to light. The police visited Jim Russo in July of 1989, where he talked about his past involvement with Carolyn, how they staged photographs to try and blackmail a man, and how she had asked for a gun for protection from a girl named Betty Jean. So that was new information to them. When Carolyn had asked for the gun for protection, she said she needed it to protect herself from a woman named Betty Jean. Given all of that, they get a search warrant for the PI office. They didn't find the gun, but they did find slugs that matched whatever Betty was shot with. Then Parco told the police he had sold Betty a gun and a silencer made by George Peters. At Peters' shop, shell casings that matched the bullets that shot Betty were there because George had told the police he had fired a few practice shots with that gun to make sure everything was working before he gave it to her. Parco was offered limited immunity on the gun charge if he testified against Carolyn in the trial. They also went through her phone calls and saw a call made to an ammunition shop in New Jersey. When they asked for the purchase log from that day Betty was killed, there was only one woman on the list that day because she had called the ammunition shop the day Betty was murdered. So only one woman purchased ammunition that day, a woman named Lisa, whose address was in Long Island. So they drive out to this woman and ask her why she was buying ammunition all the way in New Jersey. She explained that she had never purchased ammunition there. Her ID was stolen at work. She had reported it stolen and had a different ID now. And it was found out that guess who worked with her at that place? Carolyn Warmus. What are the odds? In January of 1990, a Westchester County grand jury heard testimony and reviewed evidence in the Betty Jean Solomon murder case. On February 2nd, Carolyn Warmus was indicted for second-degree murder and a warrant for her arrest was issued. A few days later, she surrendered in White Plains Court, where Westchester County DA's investigators took her into custody. At arraignment, Carolyn was held on a $250,000 bail and sent to the county jail for processing. So this case blew up. Mostly because, like I said, it had a lot of similarities to the movie Fatal Attraction with Glenn Close. This Glenn Close has an affair with this man. She doesn't know he's married or whatever, and then she tries to kill his wife. The media took over and went wild with it, as they always do. Also, Carolyn she is a good-looking woman, so it like sort of is reminiscent of Pamela Smart to me, just like I don't know what it is about like hot criminals that the media loves. Do you remember that guy who was a felon and then his mugshot went viral and then he was a model? Something needs to be studied about hot criminals. On January 14th, 1991, Carolyn showed up in a super tight outfit to court. Photographers could not get enough of it. Her lawyer wanted to like keel over and die. The assistant District Attorney James McCarty gave his opening statement where he gave what evidence they had. He told the jury about the gun, the silencer, the ammunition purchase, the former private investigator business, and just like the general behavior of her in past relationships. He urged them to just use common sense in piecing it all together, and he was confident they would find the answer to be that Carolyn was guilty. He's like, listen, we don't have a lot of physical evidence, but if you take all of these pieces, that is the only conclusion that makes any sense. Her attorney, David Lewis, gave his opening statement where he painted Paul out to be an awful man who repeatedly lied to his wife so that he could go out with Carolyn and probably other women before Carolyn came along. He painted Vincent Parco as a man who was in the business of saying and doing whatever to get out of something and told the jury that there is no physical evidence tying Carolyn to this crime. So if you have even a fraction of a doubt, justice would be deciding not guilty, which he is not wrong. On February 7th, 1991, Paul Solomon took the stand where he spoke of his marriage to Betty, about how he had other affairs besides Carolyn, and how he regretted sleeping with Carolyn. He said, I cared for Carolyn very much. I felt guilty about the sex. I was not going to divorce Betty Jean. But he had intercourse and oral sex with Carolyn on several occasions during the year, and he said it's very hard to resist Carolyn. Defense attorney Lewis was very prepared to question Paul. He had Paul talk about his various affairs because he had already admitted to sleeping with other women besides Carolyn. He explained to the jury that Paul had actually accepted an immunity deal to testify, even though he could have waived immunity to try and cast doubt on his innocence to the jury. Like, why is he so eager to testify in exchange for immunity? Why does he need immunity? Like, what does he know? What did he do? And then to further take away from Paul's sympathy, Lewis asked him about his monetary gains after Betty's death, which included a movie deal that Paul had signed off on. This is from Murderpedia. Lewis said, "You have a deal with Citadel Productions and HBO, right?" And he said, "I believe so, yes." He looked very embarrassed. Her lawyer asked if it was true that he received $25,000 up front, $1,000 if the movie is made, and then a $30,000 consulting fee. Paul said that he didn't know the figures. He's interested in hearing that because he hadn't heard it before. And her lawyer's like, "Well, did you or did you not sign the contract?" And he's like, I did sign the contract. I know I signed the contract. Whatever. And then her lawyer said, "You don't know the movie is called The Paul Solomon Story? You didn't know that? That's just like something you were not aware of." And he said quietly that like his hope was that the movie wouldn't be made. Which, whatever, I don't believe that. By the time Paul left the stand, Lewis's job was more than done. The jury was hoping to see a changed man from the one who cheated on his wife, but that's just not what happened. Next on the stand was Vincent Parco, whom both sides explained that he was not the most trustworthy source. And he is here because he got a deal. He's here because he's cooperating in a deal. He mentioned that Carolyn had asked him repeatedly for a gun because of some burglaries in her neighborhood. Carolyn also told Parco that she had an ID that wasn't hers. She told me that one of the employees or teachers in her school had left a pocketbook or wallet in the locker room, and that she had picked up some identification that she might use in the future. He went on to describe how the subject of a silencer came up and how Carolyn was very interested in this device. And from that time on, she became persistent about getting a silencer for the firearm, he said. At some point, I told her an arbitrary price, probably would be like $2,500 for the gun and silencer, and he said that she would agree to pay any price. During the week of January 7th, 1989, a week before Betty's murder, Parco said he delivered the .25 caliber Beretta handgun with a silencer to Carolyn's apartment. A day after the murder, Parco said Carolyn called and told him that, quote, a teacher's wife had been stabbed or bludgeoned 8 or 9 times. She said the police had questioned her about the incident, but she denied any involvement. Vincent said he asked her, "Are you sure she wasn't shot?" He was like, "This is too convenient. Are you sure you didn't shoot her?" And she said no. And then he said, I asked her, like, "What about the gun that I gave you?" And he said she said. Carolyn told him that she wanted him to come pick it up, allegedly. Parco said during testimony. Later, Parco also testified that Carolyn told him that she threw the gun on a parkway somewhere. So you really can't trust this man. The gun never emerges. I don't know where it was. The defense basically got up and had him state how much and how easily he can lie because of his job. And then the issue of a phone call comes up. A call from the Solomon residence to 911 at 7:15 p.m. the day Betty was murdered. The operator said the woman on the line was screaming, "Help, he's killing me." The operator did say she could not be certain if the person said he's killing me or she's killing me. So the prosecution claims that it was actually Carolyn who made that call. Betty was shot several times. She was found in the living room with blood around her. There wasn't any blood in the dining room where the phone was. And Carolyn did not get to her date with Paul until 7:45, if you recall. And he had left much earlier to go bowling. Plenty of time for her to murder Betty before 7:15, make a phone call, and make it to her date on time. So she says, he's killing me, to throw them off of her trail, but she also knows that Paul will have an alibi, so he won't be blamed for it. Because she doesn't want him to get blamed for it, because like in her fantasy, she wants them to be together. And that can't work if either of them are in jail for murder. So it seems like a perfect plan that Carolyn would come up with. Detective Constantino testified next. He worked this case from the very beginning right up to the very end. So he was truly an expert on this case and what happened. So he outlined the entire investigation to the jury, start to finish, When it was time for the defense to question him, her attorney kept the detective on the stand for 4.5 days. Detective Constantino said that if he ever needed a lawyer, he would want Lewis representing him because he said he was the best lawyer he had ever been questioned by. He said that Carolyn's lawyer's attention to detail even had him squirming a little bit. Next on the stand was Lisa, the girl whose driver's license was stolen. She testified that she had never purchased ammunition from that store and that her ID had gone missing when she worked in Manhattan, and that she was friendly with Carolyn Warmus and that Carolyn would definitely have had access to her belongings. However, she did have to say that she does not know for sure if it was stolen or if she just lost it, and she does not know if it was Carolyn who had something to do with it. So you can speculate all you want, but at the end of the day, she truly doesn't know what happened to her ID. So, whatever. They also brought up Carolyn's phone records and how she made a call around 3 p.m. to the New Jersey ammunition shop, and then the ammunition was bought there by allegedly the girl with the stolen license. That's all not looking great for Carolyn's defense. Her lawyer tried to submit his own phone bill of Carolyn's that he had, which showed she actually made a phone call to Michigan around 6:44 p.m., which would have made it impossible for her to drive all the way to Paul's house and kill Betty by 7:15. They're like, well, we have this phone record that shows what you're saying is impossible. However, the prosecution called in the phone record company to the stand, where they said they pulled up their call logs on their end, and Carolyn definitely called the ammunition store, and she did not call Michigan at 6:44 p.m. It was a huge blow to her defense. Being able to say she made a phone call at 6:44 p.m. could have easily tied up her defense with a real nice bow. But they're saying that log is not at all correct. On April 16th, 1991, they gave their closing statements. David Lewis explained to the jury that there is no witness or evidence tying Carolyn to the scene. Nobody saw her at their house. Nobody saw her walking with a gun or a silencer. Nobody heard any gunshots. It's also, they said they built a house, but when they talk about these parts, they reference an apartment. Like, Paul and Betty lived in an apartment, so her lawyer was like, she walked all the way up the stairs of the apartment building in the hallway with a gun and a silencer, and not one person saw anything. He explained that this was all planned by Parco and Solomon to frame Carolyn, and you cannot believe a word either of them say. They're both very untrustworthy. He then sympathized with the jury, saying, listen, this is a hard thing to do. I'm glad I'm not the one doing it. It's a tough decision, giving all of the circumstantial evidence and everything surrounding it, and wish them luck. The prosecutor said, basically it's not his fault that the witnesses sucked. It's not my fault I don't have great witnesses. Because sometimes you have to get with a sinner to get the devil, which is just... So essentially he told the jury Carolyn's the devil. He called her manipulative and cunning. He brought up that not only did she murder Betty, but it was premeditated because she had made a whole plan to do it. She asked for the gun long before she murdered Betty. And closed by basically saying the only logical solution going on here is that Carolyn killed Betty. There is no other logical explanation for why Betty Jean Solomon was murdered. The jury went out for deliberations on April 17th, 1991. They would not return for 11 days, which had everyone in a panic. So everyone's like, they're not sure if maybe Paul was involved. Is Carolyn innocent? Maybe she was guilty. Are they arguing over what's going to happen at the sentencing if they do this, whatever? They have no idea. Because when we used to talk about these cases, you hear things like the jury came back in 30 minutes. That's never a good sign. So the fact that it had been 11 days really has the prosecution sweating their asses off. On the 12th day, April 27th, the jury returned to the judge with a shocking hung jury, 8-4 in favor of conviction. And because most states require a unanimous decision for a guilty verdict, they were forced to let Carolyn go. Paul Solomon told reporters, "My family and I are devastated by the knowledge that this nightmare must go on." Detective Constantino was equally disturbed. He said, "I was very disappointed. There is no doubt in my mind that she committed this murder." And the DA's office obviously announced they would be seeking a new trial. So, as predicted, in January 1992, the second trial began. This time, the prosecution was able to bring forth new evidence on the phone records from the first trial and the fact that she was indicted for forgery and tampering with physical evidence in December of 1991 from that, I believe, from that fake phone record. The second trial plays out almost exactly the same as most second trials do. There's usually not a whole lot different going on. The same people will call to the witness stand. However, David Lewis apparently had had enough of Carolyn Warmus. He left the defense team and a new lawyer was hired, William Arnwald, a former federal prosecutor and well-known in White Plains Court. Meanwhile, David Lewis filed a civil lawsuit against Tom Warmus for non-payment of his legal fees for defending his daughter. Bad blood there. In the second trial, along with the new information that Carolyn had been indicted for forgery and tampering with physical evidence, the prosecution produced a glove. It was said was found next to the victim's body with microscopic blood stains on it. This glove had been missing for 3 years because there was only one glove next to Carolyn's body. So it had been missing for 3 years. And out of nowhere, Paul Solomon finds it in a closet of their home. Odd. The defense, however, claimed that Solomon placed the bloodstain on the glove to frame Warmus. Warmus's attorney questioned why the glove, which was found by Solomon in a closet between the first and second trial, was allowed as evidence and argued that the prosecution failed to provide definitive proof that the glove belonged to Carolyn or that it was the same glove as the one pictured in the crime scene photographs. The judge allowed the glove to stand as evidence in the case. The defense continued to press its argument that Paul was trying to frame Carolyn for the murder. So I don't know if they're alleging this is like the missing second glove or if they are alleging the glove next to the glove next to Betty Jean's body that was like photographed had gone missing and they didn't know where it was and then Paul found it at his house. Either way, they're saying they have a glove with Carolyn's blood on it from Paul's house. From Carolyn's credit card records, the prosecution was able to prove that the defendant had purchased a pair of gloves 1 year before the murder. So they're saying, we found these gloves, one was photographed next to the body, and we know you bought gloves just like this. So the jig is up. In the meantime, people still do not like the vibes of Paul Solomon. Like, he is getting zero sympathy. They did not like that he was a part of that movie deal and like sold the rights to like Betty Jean's murder and his story and all of that. They also didn't like that he never moved out of their house that Betty was murdered in. It made it seem like it didn't even bother him, like walking over the same spot that his wife was murdered every single day, like didn't affect his life at all. The case went to jury on May 21st, 1992, and deliberations lasted 6 days this time. Still kind of a long time. This time, however, Carolyn was found guilty of second-degree murder. Carolyn begged the judge for leniency because she did not do it. She said, "I am standing here before you, Judge Carey, devastated about being sentenced for a crime I did not commit, and I can only ask you for leniency because I am innocent." She said, "If I am guilty of anything at all, it was simply being foolish enough to believe the lies and promises that Paul Solomon made to me and allow myself to be manipulated by him." The judge was not swayed by her pleas and sentenced her to the maximum of 25 years in June of 1992. Because I think she could have gotten like 10 or 15 years, and that's sort of what they were hoping for. But this man was like, no, I think you are like a danger to society and others. On March 15th, 1993, Carolyn Warmus's attorney filed a motion for a new trial, claiming that the two pieces of key evidence had been withheld by the prosecution, which you're not allowed to do. Like, you have to give the defense a chance to know what they're going to be defending, I guess. So, like, I don't think they knew about the glove. They should have known about the glove so they could have formed, like, a better argument. Whatever. Arnwald also asserted that the prosecution knew that Paul Solomon had been having an affair with another woman, Barbara Baller, 3 months before his wife was killed, and not 4 months after the murder as he had testified. So he's saying there was a whole other person involved before Betty Jean was killed. Moreover, the defense counsel asserted the prosecution had not disclosed to the jury the existence of a second glove, apparently found outside of the Greenberg apartment building. Arnwald contended that the prosecution had used the first glove to link Carolyn to the murder, but the second would have acquitted her. None of this ended up mattering. Judge Carey denied a retrial. He was like, absolutely not. So Carolyn applied for all of her paroles. She was denied every time. She was released from prison on parole in July of 2019 after spending 27 years behind bars, the New York Post reported. During her parole hearing, she continued to insist of her innocence. Speaking of Paul, she added, I sort of feel like he took advantage of the situation when he sort of pushed me, dated me and stuff. I didn't realize he was married initially. I don't believe that. But I'm so ashamed that I did not end the relationship once I found out that he was married. I really wish I could change all of that. I don't believe that either. And in prison, Betty had said that she developed a massive brain tumor. So she was trying to get out so she could get all of these surgeries. And I think she did end up having some surgeries, so maybe she really did have a brain tumor. Carolyn is still trying to get exonerated from the murder by asking for more DNA testing on evidence that will prove that she did not do it, but nothing has come of that yet. I think a judge actually granted that the glove could be tested back in 2021, but nothing has come of that yet. I couldn't find any evidence that the results of that had come out. Last year, Oxygen did an exclusive series with Carolyn Warmus, so she's actually in this after she got out of prison, called The Fatal Attraction Murder, if you wanted a little bit more information, or if you just wanted to hear her side of the story. I'm not sure that I do, but... So yeah, that is the real-life Fatal Attraction Murder. I don't believe for 1 second that Carolyn didn't know Paul Solomon was married. I'm sorry, I don't. That's very much her vibe, going after a married man. And I do believe that she murdered Betty Jean Solomon. I think it does make the most sense. I don't see any reason why Paul would. That doesn't make any sense. He was getting everything. He had a wife at home to do all his shit, and he had a mistress that he could bang at the bowling alley. So he had a lot to lose. Carolyn had nothing to lose. This man, Paul, was not going to marry her. And deep down, she knew it. So she was like, if I get rid of his wife, then what's the issue? And that is that. Thank you so much for listening again. And if you are a subscriber or a Patreon member, I will see you on Friday for another bonus episode. And if not, that's totally fine. I'll see you Wednesday for another full-length free episode. Everyone wins. Go forth and enjoy the rest of your week. At the time of this recording, the musical is over. So I have all of my free time back. It's amazing. I can already feel it. And I hope you are having an equally great week. And on that note, I will see you next week. Bye.